Well, good morning. Thank you very much for coming out this Saturday morning. What I'd like to do, my introductions. My name is Robert Kazarek. I'm an appraiser with KLW Appraisal Group. Our firm has been contracted by the city to perform a citywide reassessment of all parcels within the city. Just a brief overview of our work activities is we started our project back in the summer of last year, and we visited every property within the city to review the information that we have on file. So information we have on file is like building style, overall condition, additional improvements, porches, garages, that sort of thing. From there, we use that information to develop the assessment on every property. Because what we want to do is for this project, we want to make sure that the assessment reflects close to current fair market value. In doing that, we analyze sales within neighborhoods, on streets, within property types, and we develop a new assessed value on the property. It's important to note that the current assessment on the properties represents a portion or a part of fair market value, because the equalization rate is currently at 75% for the city. What that means is if your house is assessed at $75,000, the estimated fair market value is $100,000. Okay, so it doesn't represent full value. In doing our valuation, we're coming up with new assessments on all the properties. And what will happen is you will get a letter in the mail around March 1st. What that letter will tell you is what the current assessment is, with an estimate of tax liability on the property itself, and what the new assessment is, and a very basic estimate of what the taxes would have been if that assessment was in place last year. Okay. Now, what's important to note is that because we're going from an equalization rate of 75% up to full market value, every assessment in the city is going to change. And what that means is the taxable value of the city may go up, but the tax rate is going to come down. Okay? So what happens is the city has a budget, okay, to provide all the services that it provides for the city of Glens Falls. That budget is based on what the city needs to provide those services. The assessment taxable value is what creates the tax rate, okay, and then that gets spread across the city residents or properties to raise the money that they need to run the city, okay. So what would happen, or what could happen, right, if the taxable value of the city doubled, right, the city budget stays the same, the tax rate would be cut in half, and then everybody will pay the same amount of taxes. So just because the assessment goes up does not mean that your taxes go up, okay? So and basically what happens is if the taxable value of the city goes up by, say, 50%, okay, or doubles. And if your assessment goes up by 40%, you would actually pay less taxes than you did previously. Now, if the city goes up 50%, and your assessment goes up 60%, then you'd basically be paying a little bit more taxes than what you previously did. So it's important to know that just because the assessment changes or increases doesn't mean that your tax liability increases. Now, the reason why the city wants to or elected to do a reassessment is the last time the assessments were, or the last time the city did a full citywide assessment was in 2015, 2005. So approximately 17 years ago. So what happens over time with market changes is properties may increase in value, or they could decrease in value depending on a lot of different factors. It depends on the market, depends on the condition of the property, depends on where it is. It could be property type. So back years ago, ranch-style houses became extremely popular, okay, in the 70s. And their value increased much greater than split-level style houses because the demand of those types of properties increased. So what can happen over time if you don't do a reassessment and don't do it on a regular basis is that those assessed values may get skewed. So you could have a house in neighborhood A that 15 years ago was worth $100,000, and neighborhood B 15 years ago was worth $100,000. Their assessment is $100,000. Neighborhood A appreciates because it's in a school district or for whatever reason, appreciates at a really good clip, and now it's worth $200,000 15 years later. But the property over here in neighborhood B, it appreciated but not at the same, and now it's worth $150,000, okay? But they're both assessed at 100 and they're paying the same amount of taxes, while this property is worth more than this property. So what the reassessment does is level the field again, brings everybody back to where their fair market value is as of a point in time, which is actually July 1 of last year. So we look at market activity up to July 1 of last year. And that's how we're developing our assessed values, okay? So it's important, it's extremely important to understand that just because your assessment goes up doesn't mean your taxes are going up. It's not a way for the city to generate more revenue because the city's capped by New York state law on what they can increase their budget to. And quite frankly, all municipalities, you know, they look at what they need to run the city, and that's what their budget is. So it's not a way of making money for the city. It's a way of just making sure that everybody's paying their fair and equitable share. So what can happen, or what will happen, is you'll receive a letter in the mail around March 1st. And like I said, that letter will tell you what the assessment was, what it's going to, and kind of how that could affect the taxes. It's not a guarantee, it's an estimate, because people want to understand how it affects their taxes, right? So included in that letter will be information on how to contact us if you want to understand individually on your property how that assessment was developed. You can schedule an appointment and meet with myself or one of our representatives, and we can go over information on your property, the sales that were utilized, and how we developed that assessed value. So there'll be information in there how to make those appointments or schedule those appointments or meetings with us, and then you can meet with us and review the information that we have on file and how we develop that assessed value. Currently on the city's assessor's website, there is an application called Image Made Online that has a database of all the information that we have on every property in the city. And you can look up your information, and I see you have a printout there of
Right.
from that Image Made
And
Online.
this here, they got wrong.
Okay, we can
They
talk
got
about
pictures wrong on here.
we can talk about your individual property
Right.
when we're done with the meeting.
Okay.
Okay, but there's ways in there for residential properties to provide feedback to us to let us know the information, whether it's accurate or not, okay? So all property owners can review that online. They can submit that information for residential property types, that's single family, 2 families, and 3 families. If you have a commercial property and you want to send us information, you could send it to municipal@klwgroup.com, and we'll review that information that you send us and update the information as we feel is appropriate. Other than that, unless there's any questions, that's pretty much.
I got a couple of questions.
Okay.
Years ago, the councilman at large was very well known, and I asked her, I said, are our taxes gonna go up? Cause they just put in 30, 40 houses down off of Bush Street.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, your taxes are gonna go down. Guess what? They
Well-
shot right up. And we got all these developments off of Bush Street going down to Water Street.
Mm-hmm.
that should make our taxes go down.
I can't say whether or not taxes will go up or down. I mean, there's a lot of factors that go into it, okay? What we're looking at, we can't control taxes. What we're looking at is the assessed value. Now, I understand, you know, if everybody paid $1 a year in taxes, people wouldn't really care about what their assessed value was, right? But because taxes, the assessed value is one side of the equation that determines the tax bill. You have the tax rate times the assessed value per thousand will give you your tax liability, right? We can only make sure that part of that equation is right, and that the assessed value represents current fair market value. Okay, if the assessment represents fair market value for every property in the city, then everybody's paying their fair and equitable share. Okay, we can't control the other side of what the tax pie is, the total budget, or what the rate, you know, and subsequently what the rate is. We can only look at what the assessed value of the property is. So what happens if there's certain projects or improvements that come into the city, or like new home development or things like that? I can't answer any questions on how that affects the overall budget. We're just looking at the assessed value.
And you're saying you want everybody to pay their equal share, right?
Fair and equitable based on current
Well,
market
then
value.
why are places like the YMCA, they don't pay no taxes at all? You got these churches that are building the state of the art, they don't pay no taxes. You got Head Start school, they don't pay no taxes. You said everybody should pay their fair share.
Okay, based on New York State tax law, okay, which allows for, tax
You
exempt.
can tell me all this, but I don't believe it. I
New York
don't
State tax,
believe it.
New York State tax law allows for tax exempt entities to not pay property tax.
Well, that's why everybody's moving out of New York, because of our
I-
taxes are so high. I know it's not your fault, but somebody's got to put a bug in these people's ears that a senior citizen who lives on a fixed income should get a break, and we don't get no break at all. We got a raise in our social security, 5% something. Cost of living went up 8%. What happened to our raise?
I,
You know?
I understand that, and I understand your concerns, but that's not something that's outside of my circle of influence. I just look at what the assessed value of properties
All
are.
right, we get back to this now. You said my garage is poor.
Wait, can we,
All right.
if do we have any other questions?
There's no one else, no? I actually put it out there for people to ask questions. There's been no response, so.
Okay,
You wanna stop? You wanna stop? Sure. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
one second.